Hello and welcome to episode number 231 of the ADHD Team Podcast with myself and Steph. Hi Steph, how are you?
I'm really well, actually. Thank you. How are you?
Great, that sounded like you were surprised.
I am surprised. I'm in a really good mood all week and I'm a bit unnerved by it.
That's great. Maybe it's because you're going on holiday next week and the sun is shining and sun is like the best thing in the world for your mood.
It really is, for sure.
So I'm very pleased. Danai, how are you?
I resonate so much. I think being in London with the sun, it just feels you're in a whole other country, to be honest. It makes you think, how would life be if I was living in a place where it's daily sunny? Maybe I'd be a whole other person.
Well, let me tell you, as someone who is living somewhere where it's sunny every day, it's fantastic, but it's bloody sweaty. I'll tell you that. I'm just constantly living in a pool of it. But it's great, and I will not complain. I think I said this in the last podcast too. But yeah, sun in Britain hits different. You just value it so much more. And it's like the best day ever. Every day you wake up and it's blue sky, you're like, this is the best day ever.
Yeah, you value it more, but it is different compared to Greece.
Of course.
I would say, like Britain and sun though, I always feel like it's almost like FOMO. It's like if it's sunny, you've got to make the most of like the AM all the way to the PM and like do something because you're like, well, I've got to use this sun that's in Britain that's never to be seen.
Yeah.
I feel like that. Obviously, I need to work on that clearly.
No, I don't think so. I think that's just like, okay, taking advantage of the day as it shows up for you right now. And it's like, well, we might never ever get sun again. So I'm going to take advantage and I'll work into the night and so that I can make sure I get the sun. I think that's valid.
Yeah.
I went to a springs the other day, like it's called Barton Springs, and it's like an outdoor, basically like an outdoor lake. Beautiful. But the guy I was with was like, it's freezing, by the way. Like it's you're going to be shocked at how cold it is. It's like, it's fine. Like I swim in like locks in Scotland, it's fine. And we got there and we went in and like, don't get me wrong, it was fresh water, so it was cold, but I was still kind of on off sweating whilst it was like knee deep or whatever. And he was like, oh my God, it's so cold. And everyone was like, oh my God, it's so cold when they're getting in, like throwing dramas. And I was like, if you think this is cold, come to the UK, swim in the Lake District. Even in the middle of summer, it's like you might lose a toe, and it's delicious. It's like you really have no idea. It made me think like my brother's wife, she's from the States, and anytime she used to come over when they were like younger, it would take her days of like wearing 5 jumpers before she could even leave the house because it was just so cold. And it's like I think in the UK we're just hardy. Like we're hardy. We have the best weather because we so much love the sun, but we can just carry on with our lives in winter. I think we're just the best, to be honest, all around.
Still aspire to be like that though. I think my Greek genes are way too strong.
Yeah.
I'm still that person that wears 5 layers in winter and complains every time it rains.
Listen, Danai, you can't do it all. That's fine. If that is your personality flaw, then just take it. Okay, let's get started on the questions. Steph, do you want to go first?
Just get it up. Okay, just starting my journey and feel like I'm becoming almost more preoccupied with food. Like I think I've had some wins in that I've paused before making a food choice / decided not to have something because it wouldn't serve me in the long run, but feel like I'm constantly having food dialogue in my head. Is that normal or okay? Had an occasion where I'd had chocolate for dessert and had ice cream in the freezer that I'd normally have as well, tried to implement a pause and decided not to have it because I don't think I needed it, which is a win, but wasn't sure whether that goes against having unconditional permission to eat, like having food rules. Ooh, that's a long question.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. Not that we are people that tend to overthink. Definitely not. The first thing I would say is, one, it's super normal to feel like you're now becoming more preoccupied when you start this journey. I've spoken about this before, the hierarchy of competence when you're learning a new skill or you're trying something new. And it's like what often happens is there's 4 stages in this hierarchy of competence. The bottom stage is unconscious incompetence. So that might be you are maybe overeating, you don't even actually realize you're overeating. You're just like, maybe this was when you first started overeating and maybe it was a coping mechanism, maybe it was just because actually it was beyond your energy needs and it wasn't required. It was a bit mindless. Like this is what we call unconscious incompetence, and that's where you kind of start. And then you kind of get into this conscious incompetence phase, so 1 stage up of the hierarchy, which is like okay, I'm aware that I'm overeating now. You know, I've seen this post from somebody from the ADHD team on Instagram, and I've started to realize that this is not the most healthful thing for me. I don't quite know how to change it yet, but I'm aware. And then the next stage is conscious competence. And so what's happening here is like, okay, right, now I'm making these changes and I've started working with a coach, and I'm aware that I am like starting to make these changes, and maybe you're a bit further on maybe than you are right now. I'm not quite sure in terms of where you are in your journey, but you started eating mindfully. You've added a pause, which is one of the hardest things to do. But you're aware that you're adding the pause. You're aware that you're asking yourself, I'm hungry for this. Like, what does my stomach feel like? Okay, I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to sit down. Like, you're very aware of these things. This is what we call conscious competence. Totally perfect. I don't like to use the word perfect. Normal, expected part of this change. And then the kind of top tier of the hierarchy of competence is unconsciously competent or unconscious competence, which is like you're adding a pause. You're doing alternative things when you're feeling stressed away from eating. You're taking a walk, you're doing these things, and you don't even notice that you're doing it. I think recently I spoke on the podcast about when I was in the shop with and she'd said, do you want a satsuma? And I was like, and I checked in with my hunger. I said, oh, I was like, no, thanks. And then I was like, oh, actually, no, yeah, I do. And she went, wait, why did you just change your mind? And I went, checked in with my hunger. And I was like, no, I don't want one. And then I thought, I checked in with how much fruit and veg I had, and I hadn't had any. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah, I do want one. And that's why I had it. I didn't think about that's what I was doing at the time. But when she asked me about it, I went, oh, interesting. That was unconscious, but a very competent decision. And that's the kind of hierarchy that you're going to work through. And sometimes you'll come up it, and sometimes it'll come back down again. Like, you're not always going to just stay at that kind of top end. Long story short, totally normal to go through these phases and feel like you're thinking about things more and you're a bit preoccupied more, at least initially, but over time that will start to dissipate again.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was going to say, because there's that thing in the question about having a constant dialogue in my head, and I say sometimes to my client, something that can be really helpful is how can we kind of shift that from something that sounds like almost like you're battling with your thoughts, and things feel so exhausting, versus to a dialogue that's much more compassionate and much more understanding, and much more you kind of accepting the thoughts and the feelings as they're showing up in those moments, and just to kind of again remove that kind of level of exhaustion that it can add by constantly having to be intentional about asking yourself those questions and taking that pause. And that's where the awareness can really help. If you kind of through also the coaching, right, you get to build awareness of, okay, that's the reason why I've been struggling with food, and that can help you be a lot more understanding when you do need to have those inner conversations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Danai, question.
How do you break food rules that logically help you lose weight?
I think with this one, I would say when it comes to like losing weight and working in a relationship with food, sometimes you need to think about like, your long-term strategy as well as like your in the moment tools. So sometimes I would reframe it as like working on my food rules, conscious ones or subconscious ones. They're not only going to help me get to my goal, they're going to help me maintain that goal when I get there. And it might feel a bit counterintuitive to be like, oh, I'm eating a trigger food every day. But what we're doing with that is we're reducing the urgency of that food. So then you don't feel the need to get rid of it every time you see it. And then in the long run, I think that does have a significant impact on long-term weight loss.
So it's so true. I actually wrote a post on this the other day, but I haven't posted it yet. But it's like things that you think are helping your fat loss that are actually hindering your fat loss, and it's food rules. You convince yourself that not having these foods in the house is helping your fat loss. It might help your fat loss for the next week. It's not helping your fat loss long term. If it was, then you wouldn't be in a cycle, and I'm not saying you are, but you wouldn't be in a cycle that is like this yo-yo diet cycle. It hasn't worked for you in the past. I think that's a really common narrative of like, well, what's worked for me in the past with fat loss is X, Y, and Z. And it's like, but if they had worked for you in the past, then you would have maintained that fat loss. Not everyone wants to maintain overall fat loss. You maybe got leaner than you'd like, or, it was a short-term thing for a certain reason. Like, not everyone wants to maintain it, but most people do. So it's like, if it worked, then you wouldn't be in that situation. Dieting, again, it's like group fat loss, international, what's the word? Try not to name them. but you know, these places that do things like sins and weekly weigh-ins and stuff like that, most of their money comes from returning customers, and there's a reason for that. So yeah, totally agree. Okay. Any advice on how to effectively communicate when your partner has ADHD? I saved this one, Steph, for when you were on the podcast.
So, sorry, it went so quick, I didn't even know what you said.
Sorry. Any advice on how to effectively communicate when your partner has ADHD?
I would say I'm very lucky. My partner has been with me a very long time as well, so he's seen the journey. But because I'm the one with this in this situation, and it's so helpful for me that I can communicate, and he can basically support me in the ways that I sort of need. I think it stems back to like communication. So if you feel like actually I need to have support in, I don't know, just thinking like housework, or maybe support in meal prep or cooking dinner, whatever, like you can voice that. I think I get frustrated when we talk about ADHD and it's like you feel that you have to be like everyone else and doing all of these things. Like I think I even did a post about it once about feeling a bit inadequate. Like actually voicing what you need is absolutely fine, and you're not cheating life by asking for a bit of support. So I think if you're communicating that and they understand, or if you're trying to explain how you're feeling, then they can only hopefully listen and support you. I don't know if I've answered that question very well, but communication is massive for this, for sure.
Yeah, I think you have. I think it's like, so from this perspective, so the person that I'm working with is her partner that has ADHD and recently been diagnosed. And I think it's like what you were saying, like you creating the space for them. Like, I think the thing is asking, like, how can I support you? Where do you feel like that you struggle with this? And like, what do you think would help? And maybe they'll say, oh, do you know what? I struggle with like making sure that I'm eating my meals because I forget, as an example. It's like, okay, well, would it be helpful for me when I make my breakfast to maybe make your breakfast, or just to remind you to have your breakfast when I have my breakfast, or like ask, what do you think would be helpful? I have a question for you, and this is maybe a wider question of where do you think you draw the line between, I'm trying to think of an example. So ADHD, I think you like we kind of on the same lines of this, where I think ADHD brains have such magical potential, and a lot of people close to me have ADHD and are the most interesting people that I've ever met, and I think it has such power. But then on the flip side of that, we know that things like risk-taking behaviours are more problematic. In relationships, we know it can show up with things like differences in sex drives and differences in communication styles and stuff. And I wonder, and I guess this is more of a question of it, I guess, in terms of like maybe emotional maturity and stuff, of like, where do you think, and I'm thinking about this client a little bit in particular, but in general, where do you think you go, okay, well, I can make space for that because it's ADHD, and it pushing your boundaries? Let's take sex drive for an example. So this is not this client, this is me thinking about if I was in this situation. So we know with ADHD, right, if a male has ADHD and a woman doesn't, and we're not talking heteronormative relationships here, right, there tends to be a bigger mismatch in sex drive. And if a female has ADHD and the man doesn't, there seems to be a slightly lower mismatch, right? Which is really interesting. But say you're in a heteronormative relationship and you do fall into this, which again is not necessarily this client and not everyone. Where do you think you draw the line? Being like, well, it's not my fault, it's ADHD, it's a manifestation of ADHD, versus, okay, but that's not your fault, but also it's still something that's not okay. Like, do you understand the question I'm asking? Like, where do you feel like it's like an excuse versus making allowances for? Like, where's the line?
I think that comes down to like what that the partner that has ADHD, what they need support with, and then what the other partner needs support with, and then it's constantly meet in the middle. I would say looking at like, there's always a strength in a pair, and it may be that person's strength is, not saying they're carrying it, but in different seasons of life, they might be carrying that slight burden for a little while, but then it will swap. And I do think looking at it like that can be quite helpful. In terms of, I'm thinking more like sex drive as well. I think why not? Like communicate that. Like, I think that's important as well. And then also knowing, like, I've said what I've said, and, you know, hopefully that will, whatever will happen next will be good for both of us. But then knowing that you've got to take responsibility of, like, your symptoms and your personality and yourself. I think what you don't want to do is like go, I've got ADHD, so this is why I do this. I don't believe in that. But I also think in understanding your ADHD tendencies can allow you space to go, actually, that makes a little bit sense for me. And now I can actually be genuinely compassionate towards myself. And now my partner understands that too. And Trav understanding ADHD has been life-changing, and it's really supported us two as a partnership. So I think everyone needs to understand ADHD. I think it's a game changer for everybody, because there's so many people out there that aren't diagnosed with it, or they're probably self-diagnosed but don't feel that's valid enough because they've not been medically diagnosed. And if we just learn a little bit more about it, then hopefully we're not just always in this neurotypical bubble that doesn't always work for people.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting too, and time you might like want to jump in on this, I'm not sure, but it's like similar, I guess, to anything, depression, anxiety, I don't know, generational trauma, whatever. It's like, okay, I understand that these are manifestations of X, Y, or Z. I'm not going to fall into, well, it's not my fault because these are manifestations of that. It's more just a case of, okay, well, I have the awareness and understanding that this is a result of, in part, my anxiety or my hormones or whatever it is, and I'm going to take responsibility for how that shows up in accordance with what else is going on. I think I had this discussion with someone the other day. I snapped at someone. I was being an arsey. I was being an arse, and I snapped at him for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And then it was just because I was really, really hormonal, and it was totally unnecessary. And I was like, and then it just comes down to communication of me then having to say sorry and saying like, sorry, it was my hormones. It's not okay. I shouldn't have snapped at you. That's not how I want to show up. This is why, but I'll work harder to do it next time. So I think it's like just having that, taking the personal responsibility within the overall umbrella of the awareness of why it might be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in all relationships, regardless of whether someone has a diagnosis or not, that you're always going to have differences with your partner. You're going to communicate differently. You're going to have different needs. You know, you both may have different life stressors happening at different times. So I think it's so important to be able to kind of recognize your patterns as a person, how you fight, how you may be responding when you're under stress, how you may be projecting that to another person and taking responsibility. And even more important, when you do have perhaps a mental health or a physical health condition that you know tends to come up quite a lot in your day-to-day life. And I think the responsibility side of things is really, really important, and being vulnerable, because I think sometimes we're really afraid to talk to our partners about how we actually truly feel and how much something is impacting us, and just explaining to someone that actually, yeah, this is really tough for me, this is how I feel, and really help you connect with the other person even more. And then, you know, them then seeing that you're taking the responsibility and you're doing the work to actually create the change that will support both you and, of course, as a result of the relationship.
Just thinking about like housework while we're here, for me, it's not something that I love to do. Not many people do, but for Trav, it's very easy for him. But he makes a mess, he'll like clean it up there and then. For me, I won't think about it. But then I don't want him to come back from work and then I've been at home all day. Yes, I've been working, but I don't want there to be like mess in the kitchen. So what I'll do is I'll go, I know he comes back at this time. I'd rather him come back to a clean space because I know he likes that, but I'll set myself a deadline. So, and that works for me. Like I work really well with like harsh deadlines, and then I'll do it. It creates a bit of action for me. So I think, but I only know that because I've built my own self-awareness, but I'm doing it because one, I want to do it, and two, I want to support my partner and I want to make him happy too. So there's that middle ground to be found for sure.
Great. Okay, Steph.
Oh Christ. Sorry, I forget that this is a recorded podcast sometimes. Any dating tips for someone that has come out of a very, oh no, sorry, I'm on the wrong question. Sorry, back up. Any tips on keeping focus when out of routine? There we go.
I think there's something to be said for recognizing the difference between being out of routine externally and internally. And what I mean by that is there are certain things that you can keep in a routine regardless of your external environment changing. So examples might be, you can still eat 3 meals a day. Maybe not 3 meals. You can still eat 3 versions of a meal or a snack potentially every day, probably. I'm trying to think of an example. Again, maybe not if you're a surgeon or something. I'm just thinking about, on the whole, right, average. There are exceptions to this. You can still, if you're out of routine, take 5 minutes to breathe somewhere in your day. You can still hopefully focus on some form of movement every day, once a day, regardless of being out of routine. It might not be your usual movement. It might not be your usual meals. It might not be what you quote unquote have as quote unquote optimal in your head. But I think recognizing that through a lot of the work in terms of mindfulness and meditation and movement and all of these things, you can start to create like this inner environment of peace and some consistencies, so that when all of this stuff is going on around you, it's like you still have the certain things to lean on that don't change no matter what. So I think like cultivating, like knowing what your non-negotiables are and cultivating that inner sense of, I don't have to let all of this chaos infiltrate my space. Sometimes I think of it as, you might have this with a partner, you might have this yourself. I know that, like, I sometimes get this, especially at the start of a relationship, where, when you've had a really busy day and you get into bed with your partner and you're like, this is our little bubble. This is our space where nothing infiltrates this little space. It's why I hate going on Instagram on my phone, like Instagram in my bed and all these things. I'm like, I don't want anyone, as much as like, I love you guys, I don't want you in my bed. Like, well, Steph, that one time.
Don't talk about that.
Moving on. So like I like to think of like, I think it's really important that we all have this sacred space of like within us where we don't let other stuff get in. It's like that kind of new relationship when you get into bed feeling of like not letting anything else in. And it's like, can you cultivate that within yourself? But then I also think thinking about things in terms of not as, okay, I have to weight train 5 days a week, but okay, I'm going to take a step back and think, okay, I'm going to move every day. And not have to eat 3 to 5 servings of protein, vegetables and fruits with every meal, all of these things every day, but I need to eat regularly every day. And trying to take a step back and keep perspective of like, it's not a specific thing that you have to do, more like it's kind of more of a general flow of certain habits and behaviors that are going to serve you, and trying to focus more on those rather than like the hardcore, this is what it looks like in the gym type of vibe.
I agree a lot. I think the flexibility is key. And I was just thinking, because I have a lot of people going on holidays at the moment where, of course, that's kind of you're completely out of your routine. And if that is bringing up a lot of anxiety for you, I think what Emilia, you're saying about being intentional with doing things that help you stay calm and grounded is really important. I even have clients that sometimes, they could be going at the beach and with their friends, and how we're all sitting down in a sunbed, you could still put your headphones on and do a meditation. No one is ever going to know, right? And still find time during the day to do those small things that help you then stay more focused on the things that are important to you.
So I was just going to say, I think people tend to overcomplicate it when they go out of routine because they try to overcompensate. The best thing that I feel is important for clients when they're on holiday or wherever, like I have clients that work abroad, is go, well, what's my intention when I'm on holiday? What do I want to feel like? Okay, so then work backwards. So what's one habit that can support me feeling like that? And it might be a nourishing breakfast every day. It may be that I take some time out from family and go for my own solo walk. It might be that I do meditation before I go to sleep. And just sticking to that one habit, you then still cultivate a little bit of routine, and you create you create your own routine, and it feels, like you said, quite grounding, instead of going, I've got 7 habits on Apotheo, oh my gosh, I can't do any of them, and then that spirals into this overwhelm. And actually we just need to clear the focus completely and maybe think of 1 to 2 habits, and you stick with that for that week.
Totally agree. And I think just touching on the holiday stuff, there's a lot of power in just communicating those things to the person that you're with. Because sometimes we think it's this big deal to say, well, I can't keep a routine because I'm with my family, I'm my kids and my partner, and it's selfish for me to say I need to go and do some movement, and I can't spend 5 minutes meditating in the morning when the kids need to have breakfast and all of these things. But I question, like, can you just communicate this with your partner or your friends and say, okay, for me, like, what would really help me and help me enjoy this holiday more is if I just have that 5 minutes in the morning where I can just breathe to myself, and then we'll crack on with the day. Like, and just sort of vocalizing it like that, it just takes the pressure off, because a lot of times we feel reluctant to do these things because we're scared of the perception of other people. Like my best friend, who I always go on holiday with, we've been best friends since we were 13, so we have great communication, obviously, but she'll say to me, like, oh, do you want to go and have a mindful moment, or or when I went in the sea, when we went in at sunset, she said, I'm going to get out, are you just going to stay in and have a mindful moment? And I was like, yeah, I am. And just lay there, and like she's waited outside of the beach, and like just being able to communicate that. Or like we always sleep in the same bed or the same bedroom, but I'll put my earphones on before we go to sleep, because she's like, okay, you're going to do your meditation. Sometimes she'll do it with me. But little things where you can communicate it. Or she gets mad because the hotel that we went to recently in Kos had no vegetarian protein. It was all just vegetables. So I was having to have a protein shake every night before dinner. And it wasn't me being awkward. She's like, but that's important to you. Therefore, like, she complained to the hotel. She's like, there's no vegetarian protein options. Like, she is next level, just a bit one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life, right? But I do think sometimes we worry about these types of things because we think we're weird. We think, oh, does that make me look like I've got issues with food? Does that make me look like I'm being selfish because I'm making her wait to the side of the beach whilst I spend 3 minutes in the water looking at sunset? Like, no, like that's my own, I don't think like that, but that could be my own fear of her perceptions. But it's like, if you just communicate it, then actually you'll probably find that it's not a big deal at all. And it's like, you do you. And if it is a big deal, and it's like, why is that a big deal? And that's maybe a bigger issue for today.
That's another question.
Yeah, I won't address that one. Okay, Danai, go for it. Question.
So this is from my client. As my body has changed, I don't know how to dress anymore. Clothes I used to wear don't suit my shape, but I don't know how to address this or figure out what will look good. As a result, I just buy bigger and baggier clothes that hide me. As I'm learning to accept and love my body how it looks today, any tips for working out how to enjoy clothes again and feel more confident?
What's that website Anna uses? Shop Style? No.
I don't know.
Oh, Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix.
Might write that down.
Yeah, it's whenever you see Anna wearing like a cute wee floral dress or something on her story, she's got it from Stitch Fix. She's got a blue one. It's just like she looks like some sort of angel. Stitch Fix is like this website where you put in your these kind of styles that you might like, or I mean, Anna would probably be able to talk about this more, but like your measurements and stuff like that. And what they do is they come up with a package and they send you all the clothes out, and then you send back what you don't want. And it's stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but they're like, oh, this might feel good in your body, or like based on the color preferences you have, or I don't know if you upload other pictures and stuff. Anyway, that's a potential.
Yeah, I would say actually, if you want my point of view, is that I would look at not just like, I understand probably feeling in a different shape, you want to, wear different things, like literal, like different trousers, maybe a dress or a shirt, but just something to keep in mind, like also think about colours that you're drawn to. And I remember reading something about, it's called something like enclothed cognition theory. It's basically like linked to like the psychological impact of how clothes can make you feel. And I think a lot of the time we experience our feelings, and then that will dictate what we're going to wear. But actually, basically the theory suggests that what you like, a colour that you might put on. So I always say pink, because I love pink. And I feel like I show up differently in pink. I don't know why, but it just has that effect on me. And I just thought like, well, maybe while you're experimenting with different styles, maybe like see what you're drawn to, because that could probably the colours that you're drawn to, because I think that can support your body image in ways that you don't realise. And I'm going to a hen do this weekend, and like the what's it called? The outfit. What's it called that I'm looking for? Yeah, thank you. God. Out my brain. They said just wear anything that makes you feel like really bright and wonderful. And I was like, oh, okay. So I love like bright colours anyway. So I've got a dress, but then because I'm going to an environment that I'm like, I know some people, but don't know everyone. And that always makes me feel a little bit nervous. And I've got this shirt that I like the colour of, but it's like quite soft and it's quite comforting. So I've got like a mixture of like this dress that I love. It's quite bright and funky, makes me feel cool, and then I've got like this shirt on top that makes me feel like quite comfortable, and just I don't know, like if anyone is really into like sensory rest and sensory, or has got like sensory issues, like I have quite sometimes quite bad eczema, so like the texture of clothes is quite important to me. But knowing that about yourself and then like dressing for that, it can really change everything. Like, I would like totally recommend that people look into that a little bit more. I'm pretty sure it's called enclothed cognition theory. I hope it's called that anyway. But yeah, it was really interesting.
That is interesting. I think that's such a point. Like, we think of clothes in terms of what they make us look like, but why, like, can you go to like what clothes make you feel like? Speaking of, I've had to buy you know, like running shorts, the ones that have like enclosed pants and they're a bit baggier, that type of style of shorts.
Yeah.
I had to buy a couple of pairs of it. Lots of people here wear them, and I realize people wear them because they have pants inside. So the pants inside suck up all the sweat, and then like you don't have so much of a sweaty rest of your shorts. Very interesting. So I've had to invest in some of those recently, and I have to say they're quite game changing compared to the old cycling short. They're very free. I feel like I can just do whatever I want, and I'm not like sweating everywhere, which we don't need, and don't have to wear a bum bag to cover my crotch and back because that's where I'm sweating. But I got some from Lululemon, and I went in to just basically buy black ones because that's what I do. And the length ranged from like 1.5 inches to 3.5 inches. 1.5 inches, I swear. Well, I swear this is what I think it was. Anyway, I pulled them up, and like they wouldn't even cover my labia. Like, they were really short. It's just in my pants to like keep everything in. It's very weird. So then I was like, right, I'll get the longest ones I can find in my size, and it was like 3.5 inches. And I'm walking around in them, and I get my usual size, which, by the way, size up. And that was a mistake I made without trying them on. But I can't try anything on here because I'm sweating by the time I get to the shop, and that's unhygienic. So anyway, I got them, and they're so short, and I'm like, did a man design these? Is a man claiming that this 3.5 inches is 3.5 inches? Because I don't believe it. Because my God, that 3.5 inches on my body looks about 1.5 inches. I feel like someone's exaggerating because they're very short. So now I'm walking around in these kind of just labia covering, baggy, running short things, and I just feel like they're very naked. The point of the story is, can't remember, comfort is king, queen, key, and you don't want your labia hanging out.
You do not want your labia. You do not. I don't know why this doesn't remind me of lockdown, your labia. We go on to this, whatever I'm about to say, but I was just thinking, like, you know, you remember in lockdown when obviously we work from home anyway, but I like lived in my pajamas. But then I remember putting on like leggings and just even, I think it was like a sports top, don't know why. And I was like, oh, I feel a bit more like on the ball today. And I just think, oh, I wonder if it's because I put actual clothes on. And I just think, like, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, like clothes do have a powerful influence. And I'm pretty sure, I know I keep banging on about it, but I'm pretty sure it says something about attention as well. Like, it makes you show up differently, but also like it can make you, I don't know, have better attention or focus. There's something in it, and I was like, you know what, even if that's not true, I'm taking it, because I definitely relate to that.
I think so.
Absolutely. The thing I was need to say as well, because I think sometimes we for this particular client as well, is, you know, about being comfortable. You can still wear baggy clothes if you want to, but you can still choose things on hip that make you feel comfortable in, as opposed to constantly just living off a hoodie, for example, that you're bored of, doesn't make you feel good anymore, and not hiding your body away. And kind of the intention behind wanting to kind of wear the baggy clothes that matters. Kind of what you were saying, Seb, when you choose to wear that shirt, you still do it because it's kind of self-care for you. It makes you feel comfortable. You still love how the shirt looks, as opposed to, I hate my body, I'm gonna wear this baggy thing to hide it away because it's horrible. And then feeling, of course, your confidence going down even more.
It's me, isn't it? One of my clients' questions. When going through the stages of intuitive eating and building on more mindful habits, how to support acknowledging the changes in your body shape and weight, even when you are immensely grateful for your body. So she does body functionality work. She's very great at practicing gratitude for her body. She takes care of her. She's down. It's more just about, okay, well, how do you actually just, support and acknowledge those changes in your body and weight?
There's something about, I guess, accepting those changes that come as a result of then doing the work that Jay is doing with you. I think acceptance is really hard to actually practice. It's a lot easier said than done, isn't it? But it is exactly that. It is a practice, like everything else you're learning in this journey. The same with self-compassion, for example. It's not going to come to you naturally. It's like choosing it every time certain feelings are coming up, because you know how this is serving you, and you know not accepting it is going to have those consequences for me that I don't want to go back to. And I think we also have to be realistic that, considering how that culture conditioning, and also way beyond that as well, how ingrained it is in our conditioning as women, completely normal for the thoughts and feelings to come up. To expect that you're never going to ever struggle again, I think it's completely unrealistic and unhelpful. So I think normalizing it, and just even trying to create some separation between you and the part of you that is experiencing the struggles when they show up, can really help. So you're not kind of always identifying and struggling with the feelings, but you're more able to move through them with the work that you're doing over time. And your values, I think, are really important. Of, okay, why am I choosing to do these things, the things differently right now? And we cannot just build ourselves with overnight. I think it's a work that we all have to do all of the time, you know, when we're getting triggered, when we're feeling insecure, having those tools that helps us kind of reconnect with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I would say, just to add to that, maybe not specifically for this client if she's doing body functionality work, but for some people, even body functionality work might feel a bit unreachable right now, but the awareness of going, oh, that was a judgmental thought, and then just saying judgment out loud, or calling out that thought and saying stop. I'm doing this with a client at the minute who tends to ruminate a lot on their thoughts, and they find it really hard to kind of, you know, say anything neutral about their body, let alone something positive. But for them, going judgment and letting it go, like not attaching so much weight to that thought, and practicing just like stopping. And it's like you said, it's so much easier to say that than to do it, but practicing saying that out loud, stopping yourself in those tracks, and then, you know, moving on with your day, or taking yourself out of that space. If they normally crop up near a mirror, like just taking yourself out of that space and like carrying on with your day can actually be quite reachable for some people that are really struggling with their body image.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think calling out your thoughts and recognizing you're not your thoughts, and you don't have to fall into the stories around them, is obviously game changing. And we use that stop technique with so many different things, right? In terms of, maybe it's your body, maybe it's self-critical talk, maybe it's calorie counting. There's so many situations that we can use that in. But then on top of that, it's like calling yourself out for those thoughts, and then calling yourself out for those behaviors. Because honestly, I think to think that you'll never think about your body, like Danai, like you were saying, in terms of the way that it looks and stuff ever again, is unrealistic. But really, I think we normalize body checking so much more than is quote unquote normal or expected. Like, genuinely speaking, I think I don't want to say what's normal. I think it's pretty helpful to look in the mirror once a day, maybe twice a day. When you're washing your hands, you might look and just check that you've got nothing in your teeth, that type of thing. But like actually looking at your body in the mirror in the day, 0 times, 1 time maybe, or taking a selfie, or, you know, touching your body, or like noticing your back fat hanging over your back brow, or whatever it is. Like, whatever it is, all of these things are body checking behaviors. And I genuinely believe that we think that doing that all like regularly through the day is normal, and we've normalized it. And it's like, once you stop doing these behaviors, and I'm not saying avoid it, I'm saying like over time with the work that you're doing, you will naturally stop body checking so much. You don't actually think about the way that your body looks. Now, I'm saying this with inherent thin privilege, in that it's easier to not think about the way that your body looks if you're not struggling with, for example, like access to things because of your body weight, or pain because of your body weight, or just pain because you've got chronic pain. Any of these things. I'm saying this with all of the privilege from my own experience of not having those things. That being said, I've worked with a lot of clients who have these situations, right? And the same thing applies, at least to some degree, of like, if you're not looking at it all the time and checking it all the time, you stop thinking about the fact that it is changing. And I think that does just often come with time, but calling yourself, like saying stop whenever you notice these things. I know that when I'm get stressed, recently, it wasn't actually that recent, but anyway, when I was back in the UK at some point, I remember was walking past the mirror and I body checked and I was like, oh, and I called myself on it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I'd done it a few times and I was like, oh, interesting. And it wasn't a judgment. It was just like, okay, what else is going on for me right now? Okay, I wasn't eating more intuitively, obviously, but like maybe I'm eating more intuitively, or maybe I'm stressed. Maybe I can't remember what was going on for me. God knows. But I called it and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's that direct link. So I think it's just about like, again, just being quite accountable with yourself and calling yourself on it.
Calling yourself out in a non-judgmental way, because I have that with clients where they're like, oh my God, I've done that again, I'm so stupid or so silly. I'm like, whoa, did you just hear yourself just then? And they say it in front of me sometimes on calls. I'm like, no, we're not doing that today. And I think just even like that awareness of going, oh, I thought that, or I did that again, but like you just said, oh, that's interesting, and like let's get curious about it, rather than going, oh, it's another thing that I do wrong, like, because then you're just going to stay in that bubble and you're not going to get out of it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do one last question. Steph.
Oh, me. Oh, I love this one. Any dating tips for someone that has come out of a very long relationship and never done any internet dating before? I'm terrified. And there's another one. Ideas for cheap. Oh, this is a question, two questions in one. Ideas for cheap but healthy meal and snack options. With price of food these days, it seems much harder to eat on a healthy budget.
Let's do the first question and then we'll do the second question on the next podcast. You lucky person who asked 2 questions, you get 2 podcasts. Okay. Anyone? Dating tips for someone who's come out of a very long-term relationship and never done internet dating before?
I've never done any internet dating before, so I don't know.
Yeah, well.
Lucky you.
It's a fun time. I catfished once. I told you the story. Properly catfished.
Wow, please tell us.
As in someone, I think, went through my Instagram and saw what I did, saw what I was interested in, all of this stuff, and they fully made. So I've probably been, in the grand total of my entire being, I've probably been using actively a dating app a maximum of 5 hours over the course of my entire dating life. I don't really use them. I might download one and then I'll use it for like a night and then I'm like, nah, it's not for me, and I won't download it again for another 6 months. However, I think they can be great, and I know, and I've had great success with dating apps when I have used them. So I do think that they can be great. I just sometimes I'm not in the mood. Anyway, this guy once, I started speaking to him, really, really physically my type. Not that I really have a physical type. Anyway, regardless, he was attractive to me. And I can't remember what he said his job was, but he said, he loved Brene Brown. His favorite book was The Untethered Soul. He didn't say all this at the start, right? If someone said that to me at the start, I'd be like, no thanks. But like over time, he was kind of bringing these things out. There was a lot of those things where you think, oh, that's so weird. It's very like synchronicity, right? And so we chatted on WhatsApp, and like we were talking about meeting up, and for some reason, like he had an Instagram page, but for some reason I just got a vibe of like something that's not quite right here, and I couldn't figure out. We were chatting for like a few weeks, like it wasn't nothing. I just got a vibe in it, and I said, I think I'd voice noted him or something, and he hadn't voice noted back, and when you just know something's not up. And so I said to him, like, do you want to have a quick FaceTime? This is one tip I would say is, if you are going to do something, make sure you're 100% sure that this person is that person. Instagram stories or FaceTime or something that confirms that this person is this person. Because he then eventually, after me pushing him, sent me a video where he was talking on WhatsApp, and it was the audio was out of sync with his face. And then I was like, why is the audio out of sync with your face? And he said, oh, something's happened to the speaker on my phone. And I was like, well, I don't believe you. Anyway, I basically stopped speaking to him. Then I got a DM from this girl on Instagram. No idea where she got me from. No, don't get it. DM me saying, have you been speaking to this person called X on dating app or whatever? And I was like, oh yeah, but like I don't like, I think it's somebody dodgy. And she went, oh, he's actually my boyfriend, and I've just found out, no, was it her boyfriend or someone that she's been chatting to, and he's given me a list of all the people he's speaking to, and one of them is you. Anyway, I really love your content and I follow you and all this stuff. And I was like, sent to my friends, and they were like, that's that girl, like she's like, that's what they thought. They were like, that girl's catfished you, because how would she know who you are? There's no reason that she would know to message you. Like, why would he tell some random girl that he's speaking to the names of other random girls he's speaking to, and has like fraudulent them? So I have no idea who it was. I think it was the girl that messaged me. So there's my online dating piece of advice. Make sure you know who you're talking to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I've used them on and off as well. And I have to say, I was very against them for quite a while. I don't know why. Probably because I'm the type of person that, I mean, I grew up in Greece in a very different environment compared to the UK, and dating apps are not a big thing back home as well. So I was always very much about, oh, I want to meet people through connections and in person and all of that. But obviously, then I had to adjust that, okay, I live in London, I have this lifestyle right now. Let me just be open. And I think it's important to do it also at the right, when you're on the right headspace for it and you know your intentions. And I think that what made a really big difference for me, when I knew what my intentions were, it was a lot easier. And of course, having the awareness to kind of discriminate between people, it made a really huge difference. I mean, I'm not biased at all because I've met my partner through a dating app, and I mean, it's working really well. So I'm really happy for that and really grateful for the app, because I wouldn't have met that person in my life now. So I guess what I'm trying to say is try it out, because you never know.
Yeah, and be open, right? Like the person that I'm dating in the States, I met on a dating app. Like, be open, but don't judge. Like, I think it's important. Like, so easy on dating apps just to be like, nope, 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 they're not my type. Nope, nope, nope. And I think I definitely used to do that. Whereas when I've used them kind of more recently, I was like, okay, well, stay open to the whole person, and if and don't be afraid to be like, oh, you're not for me. Just unmatch them. Do that regularly. But yeah, I think it's so easy just to base it on appearances. So try not to do that, which is hard when it's a dating app, right? It's literally appearance.
And that was the life. Sorry?
You've made my hands sweaty from that story. I'm like, they're damp.
It was pretty bad. Can you imagine if I'd arranged to actually meet up with them? Who would have appeared?
Oh, when was this? Can I know? What was this?
Probably like 2021, so a couple of years ago. Yeah, it was a while ago. I've probably still got the conversation in there somewhere.
Oh
Share, put it in Facebook group.
Yeah.
So I know you were terrified. Don't be terrified. Everyone's totally legit. It's so fine. But it is like it can be super successful. I do think now it can be.
My friend that got married last year, she met her husband now on Bumble. There we go. That app. That's a good one, apparently. I wouldn't know, but
I think yeah, I think Bumble's quite good, but the girl has to make the first move. I like Hinge. I think Hinge is the best.
Yeah, I like Hinge. I mean, that's how I met my partner, so no bias as well. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's just a different way to introduce yourself to people. So it doesn't matter where you meet someone, right? It is how you communicate, making your intentions clear, and of course being, what are your non-negotiables there as well. And then aligning your choices.
And also with your own photos, make sure that like the photos that reflect your life. So like it's not just like pictures that you think you look fit in, but like show that you have friends, show that you like, or maybe you don't have friends and that's part of you and that's totally fine. Like whatever, like maybe a picture of you on a day out with your friends, maybe a picture of you hiking, maybe like show the broad spectrum of what you do in your own profile. I think that's quite important.
show the beauty of your life as well. There we go.
Correct. Okay, thanks for the great diverse questions. Thank you both so much. Bye.